Hi, my name is Tom. I live in a small village in the East Midlands. I'm a full-time farmer. Dirt under the nails, peace in the soul. You know how people say your wedding day is meant to be the happiest day of your life? Yeah, mine felt more like an open mic night at a particularly hostile person where I was the headline act and the punchline, and everyone forgot to laugh politely before absolutely tearing me to shreds. So there I was, standing at the altar, in a suit I'd sweated through by 9 a.m., trying to look like I wasn't on the verge of emotional collapse. My beautiful bride beside me, glowing, elegant, the picture of calm. Meanwhile, I looked like I'd just been told the farm's chickens unionized. Enter my parents. Late, obviously. Not like this was my wedding or anything. Just another day out where they could air their disdain and pretend to care. Mom turned up dressed like she was going to a garden center funeral. Black hat, black coat, black soul. The whole shebang. Dad rocked a suit so shiny I could practically see my childhood disappointments reflected in it. They didn't even sit down quietly. Now that would have been far too normal. Dad coughed dramatically as they waddled down the aisle, as if to announce, "The critics have arrived." And Mom gave me that look and the one that screams, "You could have been a lawyer, but instead you're knee-deep in compost and cauliflower." And just when I thought we'd made it through the ceremony without incident, ha ha ha, silly me, Dad laughed during the vows. Not even a little chuckle, no. A full-body, hand-on-stomach guffaw, like I'd just told him I was leaving everything to the dog. The vicar blinked. My bride blinked. I stared straight ahead and fantasized about getting hit by a tractor. Then Mum muttered, and I quote, "All this for a field boy?" Right, not our son, not the groom. A field boy, like I'm some Victorian urchin hoeing turnips in a Dickens novel. And yet, it got worse. Reception, speeches, toasts, you know the drill. The part where people are supposed to say nice things and pretend they've always supported you, even if they once tried to convince you to study accountancy just in case farming. Doesn't work out. But my younger brother, and oh bless him, the family's golden boy with the personality of a wet Watsit, decides this is the moment for his debut as a stand-up comedian. He stands up, glass raised, that smarmy grin plastered across his face like he just landed a Tesco internship and thinks he's Alan Sugar. And he says, and I wish I was making this up, "Let's all clap for my brother, the man who traded a career for carrots. Carrots, not crops. Not sustainability. Not building something from the dirt with my bare hands, no. Carrots. Like I gave up a six-figure job to work part-time at Bloody Bugs Bunny's allotment." The room laughed. Proper belly laughs. Pint glasses clinking. Aunt Sheila almost choked on her vol au vent. Dad wheezed. Mom actually clapped. I half expected a spotlight to hit me while someone wheeled out a wheelbarrow labeled failure, and I just stood there, frozen, humiliated. My internal monologue was somewhere between, am I allowed to fake my own death and flee to the Highlands? And I hope the wedding cake is laced with irony. But then, my wife, an absolute saint that she is, squeezed my hand under the table, tight, ready, quiet, steady, like she was saying, "You don't need their applause. You've already won." Was it pity, maybe? Solidarity? Definitely. The kind of moment that breaks your heart a bit because you shouldn't have to be comforted on your own wedding day. Especially not because your own family decided to treat it like open auditions for Britain's Got Emotional Trauma. I smiled through gritted teeth. Because what else do you do? It's your wedding day. You can't exactly start a fist fight during the speeches. Well, not unless you want to make it on Jeremy Kyle Reunion Edition. And the worst part? The cake was dry, like my patience. So picture this, we've made it through the ceremony. Just barely. And now we're at the reception. The part where people are meant to smile politely, drink Prosecco they can't pronounce, and pretend the whole family isn't one sarcastic comment away from a full-blown emotional brawl over the vol au vents. The music's playing. The buffet's open. Everyone's pretending they don't secretly hate each other. Bliss. Then Mum appears, floaty fascinator still intact. Lips pursed so tight she could have vacuum-sealed leftovers with them. And she hands me a slice of wedding cake. The classic British white sponge, dry as her tone. She doesn't say congratulations or you looked lovely or anything remotely warm-blooded. No, she hands it over like she's delivering a court summons and mutters, without even blinking, "Hope there's no soil under those nails, darling. Wouldn't want you fertilizing the cake." Right, because heaven forbid I have working hands. God forbid I touch the earth with my actual fingers and not just a Waitrose bag and a mild superiority complex. The woman says it loud enough for the table next to us to hear. And I swear Aunt Linda choked on a cocktail sausage from secondhand awkwardness alone, and before I can even fake a laugh or pretend I didn't hear it. My brother, professional smug git and family crown jewel, swoops in like a seagull at a beach picnic. He looks at my wife, poor thing still glowing with that freshly married optimism, and says, "How long do you reckon before she trades you in for someone with ambition?" Then he winks, like he's just delivered the line of the century. Unmock the week and should be handed a BAFTA and a pint of mediocrity. I laughed. I actually laughed. You know that deadpan, borderline hysterical laugh you do, when the only other option is screaming into a napkin. Yeah, that. Meanwhile, my dad, nowhere to be found in this loving family tableau. Oh no, he's over by the bar, flirting with the 19-year-old caterer like he didn't just remortgage his life for a car he can't parallel park, twirling his whiskey like some kind of discount Bond villain, leaning in with that "I used to have abs in the 80s" energy that makes your skin crawl. She looked mildly terrified, bless her, but hey, maybe she thought she was being pranked by Channel 4, and me, I just sat there, newly married, staring at my slice of cake like it held the answers to the universe. It didn't. Just a weird bit of marzipan and the unmistakable flavor of "you'll never be good enough." Then my wife, absolute legend, leaned in and whispered, "One day they'll regret this." And I swear to God, something about the way she said it gave me chills. Not dramatic ones like in a Netflix thriller where the music swells. No, more like the quiet, ominous sort of chills. The kind that say revenge might not be now, but it's simmering, and it'll be served with organic veg from our bloody, successful farm. I nodded, chucked a chunk of cake in my mouth, and smiled. Spoiler alert, she was right. But oh, not in the way any of us saw coming, right? So let's dial it back a bit. You remember I didn't become a farmer because I lost a bet or couldn't hack the corporate world. Nah, I quit the nice office job. I walked out with the sort of smug grin normally reserved for lottery winners and bought a half-derelict plot of land somewhere. The sat-nav mistook for a stray cow. 12-hour days, 7 days a week. Rain, shine, or pub garden weather. I swapped mornings in front of a screen coffee and a chipped mug for blisters mud. Streaked trousers and singing to the compost heap like some hippie serenading soil. My brother reckoned I'd be selling onions off a cart by Christmas, Mom sweetly reassured. Me, it was just a quarter-life crisis, as if turning 30-odd and knee-deep in manure was some phase you grow out of by Easter. But here's the rub. I chose it. I swapped PowerPoint for potatoes, spreadsheet for sheep, and because I'm allergic to compromise, I threw myself into it. I planted, I watered, I argued with crops when they didn't sprout. True story. I patched fences with my bare hands, fought off slugs like I was auditioning for gladiators, and brewed tea at half versus there for comfort boiling. Point just to feel something that wasn't fluorescent office light. They call it not glamorous, and they're not wrong. Surrounding me were muddy boots that never dried, shirts that smelled like yesterday's rain, and a goat, yes, a goat who decided my bed was the perfect spot for an unannounced sleepover. Nothing screams romance like waking to a goat licking your ear at 3 a.m. My wife, bless her, handled it like a saint. She wiped bedding, scooped up bleeding imposter, and whispered, "Just part of the package, love." Through crop failures, gnarly pest invasions, and more, early mornings than I knew existed, she stood by me, supported me. Even when the council house lad in me thought, why aren't we in a snazzy flat gaff to pub to tube to cheap chippy tea? But we swapped that dirty takeaway for community-supported agriculture boxes. Our fortunes rose with the produce. It wasn't easy. Some nights I looked up at the kitchen ceiling wreath of farm grime still on my jaw and wondered if I'd made the biggest mistake since Mum forced me to wear that god-awful knitted jumper at Christmas. But then a row of carrots, fat orange and proud, gazed back. Tomatoes that blushed deep red. A crowd-pleasing pumpkin patch, and suddenly it felt like our patch of earth. Proper, honest ours. So yeah, not glamorous, no champagne-soaked selfies, no influencer layouts. Just dirt, sweat, love, and occasional goat drama. But it was ours, and you know what? When the bloke whose ambition was apparently a field of muck proves people wrong, not with a fancy title, but with real graft that's worth more than any polished office job. And let's be real, while I'm up before dawn wrestling with tractors, my folks are still arguing over who fluffed up the roast at Sunday lunch Betty, while I was out here pulling carrots from the soil and trying not to cry over slug-destroyed lettuce. Things were getting rather poetic back in the land of polished shoes. Overpriced watches and conversations that started with, "My accountant says," "Let's start with my brother," the golden boy, the LinkedIn philosopher, the walking TED Talk. He launched a tech startup, which is posh speak for, "I bought a MacBook," said the word disrupt a lot, and convinced investors I was the next Elon Bloody Musk. For months, he was all over Instagram with his hustle culture, posting stories from networking brunches that looked like someone paid $18.50 to eat sadness on sourdough. His product? No one quite knew. It was something about redefining digital ecosystems, which sounds impressive until you realize it basically meant making an app that did what Google already does, but worse. Anyway, long story short, the app flopped harder than a GCSE drama student at their first audition. Turns out you can't pay your employees in motivational quotes. The funding dried up faster than Aunt Moira's turkey, and within 6 months, his game-changing enterprise was filed under casualty of capitalism. But don't worry, he still wears his startup hoodie like a badge of honor. Says he's in his resilience era, which I assume means he's resiliently living with mom and dad and deleting Klarna emails unopened. Speaking of dad, this one's juicy. Dad put the family savings, and by that, I mean literally everything, into what he called a sure thing. Now you'd think someone who once told me off for buying organic ketchup would be a bit more cautious with money. But no, he got involved in what he proudly described as a cutting-edge investment scheme. Translation? A pyramid scheme. An actual textbook. You've been warned since the 90s pyramid scheme. The kind your aunt warns you about on Facebook while trying to sell you essential oils that smell like broken dreams. I swear the man saw one graph and a man in a too-tight blazer say passive income and handed over the keys to the kingdom. Within 3 months it all collapsed. Poof, gone. Like Dad's dignity after one too many whiskeys at the family BBQ. And Mum? Well, Mum deserves her own tragic subplot. Because while the men in the house were setting fire to the finances with glee, she was busy pretending everything was still perfectly middle class and fabulous. She was still going to the salon, still ordering M&S ready meals with the smugness of a woman who's never touched Tesco value, still putting on the "oh, we're just between renovations" voice to hide the fact the boiler hadn't worked in 2 months and they were using scented candles for warmth. All fur coat, no heating. She even bought herself a designer handbag on a credit card, so maxed out it groaned when she opened it. But hey, what's dignity when the neighbors think you're still doing well? Meanwhile me, farmer boy, field lad, the joke of the wedding, the one who threw away his future to dig in the dirt. Yeah, suddenly I wasn't looking quite so daft. While they were sipping sparkling water with debt collectors on the line, I was exporting veg to half the bloody county, booking out stalls at the farmer's market, getting emails from restaurants saying, "Hi, we'd like to feature your heritage beetroot." Heritage bloody beetroot. Imagine that. The same people who once told me farming was beneath someone with my education are now debating whether to pawn Dad's golf clubs or Mum's antique face just to pay the gas bill. Honestly, if I was a better person, I might have felt bad. But I'm not. And I didn't. Because karma? Karma's a muddy pair of wellies stepping over their credit score. It all started, as these things often do, with a text from Mum. No context. No apology. No, "Hey, sorry for humiliating you at your own wedding and calling your life's work a compost heap. Just hope you're doing well. We should catch up, X." Ah yes, the passive-aggressive British opener. Translation? We're financially bleeding, the boiler's dead, the overdraft's having a nervous breakdown, and we'd like to see if the son we humiliated publicly has a heart, or at the very least, a checkbook. To be fair, she did add 2 kisses, which in her world is basically a hostage negotiation. I didn't reply immediately. Not out of cruelty, though let's be honest. I was tempted, but because I was genuinely too busy hauling turnips and emotionally repressing myself, like any self-respecting working-class bloke. Then came the call. From Dad. Now let me set the scene. This is the same man who once told me, and I quote, "No one who grows lettuce for a living can be taken seriously." So when he rang, I nearly dropped my spade out of sheer disbelief. He goes, all faux heartfelt. "Son, family always sticks together." I choked on my tea, literally coughed it up like I'd just heard Ed Sheeran was releasing a drum and bass album. Family? The same family that couldn't stick together through a speech at my wedding? The same dad who couldn't stick to one investment long. Enough to Google whether it was legal? I said right. And what does this sticky togetherness look like exactly? And he goes, well, it's more a matter of mutual support. We're just in a bit of a bind is all. A bind. Cute. Like financial ruin is a shoelace that got caught in the escalator. Next day, Brother Dearest got involved. Now this is the same man who toasted my marriage by suggesting I'd be selling carrots off the back of a donkey by December. So imagine my surprise when I get a text saying, "We underestimated you, mate. Can we talk?" I nearly framed it. I read it out loud to the goats like it was Shakespeare. Honestly, I was half expecting him to follow it with, "Sorry I was a smug prat for 2 decades. Fancy doing a TED Talk together? Now?" I'd love to say I responded with something noble and healing, like of course family comes first, but this isn't a Hallmark movie. This is Britain. And in Britain, we let people stew in their own passive-aggressive regret for just long enough that they feel it in their soul, but not so long that they can claim we've changed. So I gave it a day. Then I replied to Mum's text. "Lovely to hear from you. Bit slammed with harvest. Hope the heating's holding up XX. I'm not made of stone." She read it, never replied, which to be fair is the most British way of saying, "Fair enough, you've won this round." But let's be honest, this wasn't about the money. It was about the shift. The moment they realized the son they'd written off as the lettuce lad was now the only one in the family with a functioning bank account and a working boiler. Oh, how the turntables. Right. So I invited them over. Yes, them. The same trio who once treated me like I'd chosen to live in a bin and marry a scarecrow. But I figured, why not? We'd reached that magical part of the family drama where pity meets desperation. And I was feeling generous. Also, I fancied showing off the kitchen they swore I'd never have. It wasn't a trap per se, more an opportunity to observe natural consequences over a nice meal. Like a David Attenborough documentary, but with passive aggression instead of giraffes. I cooked everything from scratch, obviously. Nothing store-bought, nothing frozen. Every roasty, every glazed carrot, every sprig of rosemary was grown on my land. The same land they once said was just a phase. Like farming was my version of eyeliner and My Chemical Romance playlist. I even laid the table proper, full set. Napkins folded like swans, candles matching cutlery. I wanted it to scream, "Look who's not a joke now, Sandra." They arrived in silence. Classic British tension, all polite smiles and eye twitches. Mom brought flowers, which I assume was her way of saying, "Sorry for suggesting your career path." Had the intellectual weight of a bag of compost. We sat down. First bite of the roast, and I swear I saw Mom flinch. Not because it was bad, and it wasn't, it was bloody gorgeous. But because she realized it tasted like regret. The potatoes? Crispy, golden, seasoned just enough to remind them that I'd made it. That every crunch was funded by the very dirt they mocked. Dad, who was now mysteriously off pyramid schemes and very much on humble pie, looked around my modest but ridiculously picturesque farmhouse with the quiet horror of someone realizing they've backed the wrong horse. And it's galloping past them wearing Gucci wellies. He cleared his throat and said, "You've done well for yourself, son." Son, imagine. The same man who laughed during my vows now calling me son like we're doing a Christmas advert for John Lewis. I nodded. Calm, measured, no smugness. Well, maybe a hint. I did swirl my wine a bit like I was in Downton Abbey. Couldn't resist. Then Mom, bless her delusional optimism, piped up with, "We've been thinking. Maybe we could go in on some land together." Cute. Adorable, even. Like a toddler trying to pay for rent with buttons and crayon drawings. I smiled. "Oh? You fancy growing veg now?" She blinked. "Well, property's a good investment and—" "Mom," I said, sweet as treacle, "this isn't Monopoly. You don't just land on a field and get to build a greenhouse." She went quiet. Sipped her wine. Didn't even touch the Yorkshire pudding, which frankly should be considered a war crime. And then there's my brother, the fallen tech prince. He didn't say much. Just sat there swirling his wine like it had answers. He kept staring into the glass like he was hoping to see the ghost of his LinkedIn endorsements. Every so often he'd open his mouth like he was going to speak, then think better of it, probably for the best. Not sure I could have handled another. Pivoting to new opportunities. Monologue without shoving parsnips in my ears. He finally muttered something like, "It's nice here." which translated from his usual smarm basically meant, "I hate that you've won, but I'm too skint to say otherwise." I said, "Yeah, it is, isn't it?" Then offered him more roast potatoes, just to twist the knife. We ended the night with tea. Proper builder's brew, served in mugs that said grow your own and kiss the cook. They left quietly, no drama. Just three people trudging back to their car, knowing full well the only thing they harvested that day was humble pie. And me? I slept like a baby, a smug, well-fed baby, surrounded by goats in glory. Now you'd think after being fed, watered, and thoroughly outclassed at my own dinner table, they'd have the self-awareness to keep their heads down, maybe send a passive-aggressive thank you card, maybe not immediately try to monetize the one good thing in my life. But no, this is my family, and if there's one thing they've mastered, it's the art of turning their failures into other people's problems, preferably mine. So I get this message a few days later, from Mum, again. "We've been thinking, and we have a brilliant opportunity for all of us as a family. Could be just what we need. Let's chat X." You know it's serious when she throws in the vague business pitch and a kiss. Then Dad calls, putting on his best "trust me, I read the FT once" voice. "We found this brilliant property development project. Real potential. We just need some seed money." "Seed money?" I said. "You want me to invest actual cash?" He pauses like the word cash physically pains him. "Think of it as helping the family bounce back. We could even sell the farm and go in together." Sell the farm? The farm. The very thing they spent years mocking. Belittling, eye-rolling, whispering about at parties like I was a cautionary tale with muddy boots. The phase, the vegetable vanity project, the hippie breakdown with livestock. Now suddenly it's a strategic asset. Funny that. I smiled. Politely, like a Brit about to deliver soul-crushing news in the nicest way possible. Then I laughed, internally, externally, spiritually, possibly for too long. Definitely in front of them. Then I said, and I quote, "Let me get this straight. You want me to sell the one thing you all mocked me for? The thing I built from literal dirt, just to save the people who made me feel like nothing? Silence. The kind of silence that tastes like cold tea and awkward glances." Mum shifted in her seat. Dad scratched the back of his neck. My brother stared at his hands like they were going to turn into money if he blinked hard enough. "No," I said. Plain, simple. Like closing a door. No speech, no drama. No tragic music in the background. Just no. And you'd think that'd be the mic drop, the end of the story. But the twist? They didn't shout. Didn't beg. Didn't even guilt-trip me properly. They just nodded, defeated, like they'd known the answer all along but hoped I'd be soft. Hoped the old family first trick would still work. But I'm not that guy anymore. The guy they laughed at during vows. The guy with dirty fingernails. The man who apparently buried his future in the dirt. Turns out that dirt was fertile, and every insult they planted grew something stronger. So no, I didn't sell. I didn't save them. I didn't sacrifice the one thing that gave me peace for the people who took it from me in the first place. And you know what? It was the first time I ever felt taller than all of them, and I was still wearing wellies. So there we were. Post-offer. Post me choosing my sanity, soil, and self-respect over whatever vague, family-funded dumpster fire they were trying to build. I thought maybe they'd leave quietly. You know, British dignity, stiff upper lip, polite, awkward, shuffle to the car with the promise of, "Let's do this again sometime." That everyone knows is code for never speak of this again unless someone dies. But no, because apparently, emotional devastation wasn't quite enough. They wanted drama too. Mum cried. Not a single tear of remorse, mind you. No sorry for insulting your entire adult life. No wow, turns out mud money does pay the bills. Just big theatrical sobs, like she'd just found out the Range Rover's being repossessed and M&S have stopped doing her favorite pesto. "We're your family," she wailed. "How can you be so cruel?" I wanted to say, "You mocked my wedding vows because I grow beetroot for a living, Sandra." But I didn't. I just passed her a tissue, one of those scratchy budget ones on purpose, and said, "You'll bounce back. You always do. With someone else's money, usually." Dad, meanwhile, went straight into menacing disappointment mode, which if you've ever had a British dad, you'll know is the emotional equivalent of being stabbed with a soggy newspaper. "You think you're better than us now?" he barked. To which I replied, "No, Dad, I think I'm exactly as good as I always was. You lot just finally noticed." He muttered something about ungrateful children under his breath and crossed his arms, like he was about to be interviewed by Piers Morgan. And then, the pièce de résistance, my brother, who sulked, proper sulked, arms folded, staring into space like a teenager whose Xbox got taken away, didn't even touch his pudding. And it was sticky toffee, which should have been a criminal offense. So I did what any emotionally stable, completely mature, not at all petty adult would do. I slid a neatly printed sheet across the table, one each. A list of local job openings, real ones, minimum wage, 0-hour contracts, cold reality stuff. You know, proper jobs, hospital kitchen porter, petrol station night shift, part-time admin at a storage unit. I smiled and said, "You wanted help? Here's some help. Help yourselves." Mum's mouth dropped. Dad went red, not rage red, embarrassed red, which was far more satisfying. And my brother, well, he looked at the list like it was a death certificate with his name on it. They didn't speak, didn't thank me, didn't flip the table, which was a shame, because that would have been amazing for the drama. My wife, absolute legend that she is, topped up their wine glasses in silence, stone-faced. Not a smile, not a word. Just this chilling calm that said, "I remember every insult you ever threw at him, and I'm holding them like receipts." Iconic behavior, honestly. I could have proposed all over again. Eventually, they left. No hugs, no dramatic goodbyes, just full bellies, bruised egos, and the unmistakable scent of failure clinging to their M&S jackets. And me? I watched them walk down the gravel path they once said led to nowhere. Which is ironic, really, because for once, they were the ones going nowhere, and I was exactly where I was always meant to be. Right here. Home, in a farmhouse built on dirt, disappointment, and just a pinch of delicious revenge. People talk about healing like it's all scented candles and deep breaths. Me, I found mine in compost. Literal compost. That field, and the one everyone joked, would be my financial grave, turned out to be the only thing that ever actually held me together. When my family bailed, when my confidence was on life support, and even when my goat mistook my duvet for a toilet twice, that land stayed, steady, stubborn, a bit like me, really. Every seed I planted wasn't just a seed. It was a middle finger. A botanical screw you to every, "You're wasting your potential," and every, "Why don't you get a real job?" Carrots became weapons. Courgettes, a silent protest. Tomatoes, personal therapy. And now the bloke who used to be that weird lad with the wellies. Exports produce across counties. Counties. Plural. Yes, that's right. Barbara from Surrey. Your overpriced organic veg box has my name on it. I run workshops now. Proper ones. With waiting lists. Little city kids come out in their tiny wellies, calling me farmer legend on TikTok like I'm some kind of agricultural influencer, which, to be fair, I am. Last week, a video of me making compost went viral. Compost. Somewhere out there is a teenager who thinks I'm the David Beckham of broccoli. And you know what? I don't even do it for the money anymore. I mean, I do. Let's not get mad. The new greenhouse extension didn't build itself. But mostly, I do it because this patch of earth, this scrappy little corner of nowhere, gave me something no degree, no promotion, no shiny city flat ever could. Peace. The kind of peace that doesn't need validation. That doesn't chase applause. That doesn't have to sit through another family dinner being told I'm throwing my life away while someone's marriage collapses over the gravy. Sometimes I stand out there, in the morning mist, tea in one hand, who in the other, not a euphemism, and I just breathe. And I think this is it. This is what they said was failure. Funny that. They said I'd buried my future in the dirt. Turns out it grew. Let's get one thing straight. I didn't get even. That would imply they were ever on my level in the first place. I got better. And frankly, that's so much worse for them. Because you see, there's nothing quite as annoying as someone who doesn't just survive your doubt, but bloody thrives on it. And I don't mean Instagram thrives, with curated selfies and quotes about healing. I mean real muddy boots, frost on your face, bank balance in black thriving. And look, I'm not petty. Okay, I am petty, but I'm righteously petty. There's a difference. If schadenfreude were a crop, I'd be running an empire. Sod potatoes, I'd be exporting karma in crates. Because let's not forget, this started with them mocking me on my wedding day. Mum muttered about my fingernails. Dad laughed through my vows. And my darling brother decided to stand up and deliver what he thought was a TED Talk titled, "Congratulations to the Human Disgrace," formerly known as my sibling. You know what's funny, though? They were right about one thing. I did bury my future in the dirt. And then it bloomed. Into a life they can't even fake on Facebook. Meanwhile, their glossy lives have flaked like a knockoff veneer unit from IKEA. The house? Repossessed. The startup? Flopped harder than a GCSE drama student audition. And the pride? Oh, they got eaten alive by overdraft fees and passive-aggressive job center visits. And me? Well, I've got a farm. A wife who's smarter than all of them combined. 3 greenhouses. A barn full of seasonal stock. A queue of school kids begging for selfies. And an accountant who now calls me sir. Not bad for a lowly farmer, eh? They don't laugh now. They do that weird British thing where they smile too wide and talk about how proud they've always been, as if there isn't a literal video of my brother calling me a compost-scented disappointment at the reception. But here's the twist they never saw coming. I'm not angry anymore. I've got too much compost to shovel, and contracts to sign to waste my energy on bitterness, though I do occasionally drive past their flat, just to see if the parking space is still empty for closure. So no, I didn't destroy them. I didn't need to. They did that all by themselves, with a bit of arrogance, a splash of entitlement, and a generous dose of denial. All I did was build something solid, rooted, real, mine. And now, I'm the one laughing. All the way to the barn and the bank.